Right. Thanks everybody for your patience. We'll get started. Welcome to the strategy and policy meeting for the 2nd of July. I believe we're in July already. I'm excited also. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa. Homie, hui, tai. Everyone, apologies, we have Councillor McPhail and Councillor Pemberton. Would like to move those, please.
What about Phil Phillips?
We had an apology from Phil. Is he on leave?
Is he on leave? Yeah.
Yes. So Councillor Morrison as well.
Happy to move the three, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Second, please. Thank you, Councillor Rodway. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Anything outside of the ordinary? No. Thank you. No public forums, petitions or deputations. Takes us to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 21st of May. Thank you, Councillor Cook. Seconded, please. Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any commentary, questions? Correct. We put those then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Notification of extraordinary items. I have none. Just to note that there's a latish paper actions sheet which we'll cover off at the end of general business. Questions? I had none come to me. So do we have any councillors' reports, please? Easy peasy. Right, that takes us to item 9, well ahead of schedule. 9.1 is the update on the review of the Regional Coastal Plan. Thank you, Liz. Liz, sorry, just before you start, can you just be clear about whether you want to take questions as you go or once you've completed your introduction?
I'm happy for questions as I go. I'm not I've got a presentation as such to present. So.
Thank you.
Really just the taking the report as read. The point of this report was just to give you an update on the work program that we are currently underway with and for the Regional Coastal Plan, noting that at the last meeting it was raised that we are unlikely to do formal consultation or notification in this year due to the uncertainties around national direction and the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. In saying that though, the team is still busy doing a lot of work and so this report is really an update of what we've heard from you, what we've heard from the community and with some next steps involved in that. So happy to take questions around it. There is a lot of technical science work underway that will support both the Regional Coastal Plan but also wider piece of work for the marine spatial planning type work as well. So even if we don't progress with the Regional Coastal Plan this year, the work that we're doing is still informing other programs work across the organisation.
Thanks. How did you?
No, it was to that point. So this report identifies some of the work streams that the work that the team and your good selves and our communities have fed into, and so it's just showing that this work is delivering value for Environment Southland, for our communities and for the environment already. And so we've seen a number of targeted work streams that are being inputted into because of the work undertaken in the Coastal Plan review space.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, through you, Chair. It's good to see that the responses through type, that there's a high number of people concerned with rubbish and littering and human abuse of lands and activity, which is good, and I think we need to focus a little bit more on that, and I'm not sure how we can do that. But it's good to see that there's a growing concern by our community around rubbish, human activity, causing issues in our environment and our coastal region. So yeah.
Thank you.
Chair, just as an aside, just the rubbish, and just sharing with you, just come back from Martinburg Islands and just reporting to you that it's probably over 95% of the young birds that have not even left the burrow yet have got plastic in there inside them. So obviously the plastic's being accumulated locally, and the parents taking it back and feeding their birds in their burrows. So over 90% of the birds that we're taking have already got plastics in them. Haven't even left the burrow.
It's
Are they,
a sobering thought.
are they going to leave the burrows, or are they in a terminal situation?
Well, it depends if they're fat enough for the terminal or not. But no, most of them are in a healthy, healthy enough state and such like that. I just want to share with you, just even locally, we're probably, hopefully, we're the cleanest part of the world as far as our plastics in our oceans and such like go. But here we have, and I guess mudbirds is just an indicator species that we're actually seeing what's going on from there. So just want to share that anyway.
Thank you, Cheryl. Councillor Roy, you're next.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you for the report. I should know this, but what time are we scheduled to have completed this work with the coastal plan, and are we on track? I've kind of forgotten what our timeframes are.
So we haven't got a formal decision from the council in terms of setting a deadline for this work. We were originally proposing to have this work out and notified this year. But as I said earlier, we're not on track because there's a whole lot of other influencing factors that are delaying our work program. And we're still progressing to get it notified by middle of next year. But we're waiting to see what happens with the resource management reform. Things like national direction on natural hazards is one area where we maybe drafted some words around what national direction is now, but with changes in terms of how we assess risk, we're having to re-look at that, but we don't want to go out and notify that. It wouldn't be prudent to go out and notify that, knowing that by the end of this year that's going to change again. So, and also changes to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, which is what we have to give effect to. That is going to change how we address infrastructure, mining, agriculture, and land plans. It wouldn't be prudent for us to carry on this year, but if you would like to make a decision, this isn't a decision-making paper, it's more of an information.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I just wanted to know where we are in the scheme of things. So thank you.
Yeah, Councillor, we're definitely, not on track.
Yeah, right. Well, I presume.
But as Liz has said, there's lots of good work that's been done already, so hopefully we'll be ready to go when we know things. Councillor Gibson.
Could somebody clarify for me, because as of yesterday, the boat ramp down in Bluff has fees on it. Does that go back to South Border to us?
City Council.
Sorry?
City Council.
It'll be cities,
Yes,
it's their land, isn't it?
Okay. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Cook. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just on that previous discussion, my question's one on resourcing. Like Hayley, you talked about the work that's being done now is informing other areas of the council. And we've got, Liz, you talked about a lot of uncertainty going forward. So I'm thinking about the resourcing. Is it wise to be full on with this program if we don't know we've got an end destination? What I'm trying to say is, can you take the pedal off a wee bit with this work until we know where we're going? Is that wise? Or is it wise to carry on regardless of not understanding where we're going to finish up? Obviously not this term, but into next year. So I think it's just trying to be prudent if we can as a council.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question, and obviously that's a prime concern when we're looking to allocate staff time and other resources we use to support this work and others. So what we did do when we, the previous item, we looked across our work programs and who was working on what, and made decisions as an executive, because this is an integrated set of decisions, particularly with our science GM about what work we can safely say needs to continue because it has a multitude of purposes or has requirements around long stage research and monitoring. And then where we felt that there was work that is at risk because of uncertainty around national direction, the people working on that have been mobilised to support other work programs that are key priorities. So, for example, the expertise in Liz's team is moving to support us tackling the gravel management work program, which is a key priority of this council, as expressed to us via full council meetings and I believe even these hui as well. So they're supporting that because we want to get moving faster on that piece of work. So we have been able to mobilise quite quickly in order to ensure that some of our more urgent pieces of work are done within the timeframes expected by this council.
Thanks very much. And just a supplementary to that, the reason for my question is that we did start this work in 2019, and there was a considerable amount of workshops on this coastal work regarding, as I remember, the traffic on Reedy Beach, various other things. Can you assure us that the information collected now will not be lost, that we can pick up, not relearn everything, but we can pick that information up if this council doesn't happen to even start this coastal plan work in 2026, 2027, 28. We
Through you,
can pick that
Chair.
work up and not relearn it all. So that's the basic
Absolutely.
of my
Thanks, Peter.
question.
Yes, absolutely. We have very good registers and records of all of those directions from your good self. So absolutely, that's foundation. And I also, by way of an answer, refer to this afternoon's workshop with this committee, which is very much reflective of the work that this council and its predecessors have done within all matters that relate to our coastal environment.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Horrell and me, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think when I read this report, I think it looks like we're going to be focusing on the areas that we will need to do regardless of what happens to the National Coastal Policy Plan. We're getting confusing messages at the moment as to whether there'll be a regional coastal plan at all in the future, that it may well be rolled into a one plan type situation. But we've got fjordland, we've got areas that will be different from the coastal plan. I agree, there's no point in trying to fast track things when we don't know what the national coastal policy statement will totally look like. There's been some indications have been released along with other national direction, but the areas that are outlined here, like fjordland, obviously is unique. There are areas we can continue to work on that will not be a waste of time, but notifying that this year obviously is not an option anymore. But all the work we are doing, as Hayley has mentioned, will be available and will be useful when we know what the environment looks like in the future, because there's still going to have to be regional aspects to the coastal plan, including where agriculture can be and a whole lot of other things that are coming at us at pace.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, two things from me. To your to your point, Councillor McDonald, that's exactly what this report highlights. It's the work that we have still got possible in the pipeline that we can have said we can afford, and using the information that we've already gathered. So none of that information will go to waste. I can imagine I've been pretty actively pursuing that myself. So absolutely, none of it's wasted, and it's actually the point of these targeted work streams is to highlight what we can still keep going on. Which brings me to my second point, the Fiordland commentary. Bruce, you're in the room. Have you got anything to illuminate, expand on that Fiordland work? Because I know there's quite a lot of stakeholders involved, and delicate in many ways.
Thanks, Mr.
Thanks,
Chair.
Bruce.
Minor councillors, and I'm sure Liz will add to my commentary, but we've been closely involved in dialogue with Field and Marine Gardens and other stakeholders around their Fiordland response generally from a regulatory sense, and this was discussed at the last regulatory committee meeting in April, and coincidentally the day after that it was the Field and Marine Gardens meeting which several of us, Liz, myself and a few others attended, and there was general dialogue during that meeting, and it was a constructive meeting as it usually is, but there was some dialogue around the importance of the respective agencies making sure that we've got our eye firmly on the ball with Fiordland, that we're adequately resourcing our statutory responsibilities. So following that, we had a managers workshop across the functional arms of our council, and we'll bring a paper which is mostly complete through to the regulatory committee in August. Essentially, a key focus for the agencies is everybody is resource constrained, and it's a very, very large area, but it's hugely important, internationally significant area, hugely important culturally. So it's really, really important that we adequately resource our respective responses. And a key to that is collaboration between the agencies. Such a huge area that we're never going to have necessarily the right person in the right place at the right time. I think everybody recognises that. So collaboration is key. Another area that's really important for the future is using technology and seeing how we can make more use of things like remote monitoring. There are some privacy aspects for that, but we're certainly working through that between the agencies. And there is really good collaboration involved. Another aspect of this also, just to refresh your memory, that there was a plan change undertaken, a bespoke plan change undertaken to the regional coastal plan with respect to Fiordland, which effectively, in a nutshell, was a hold the line type regime where it made it somewhat more legally challenging for additional activities to come in while we're still working through that border carrying capacity type approach. I just got a quick update from the consents team about the number of Fiordland-related applications in the system at the moment. It's less than 10, and most of them are renewal type applications. So we haven't got a tsunami of new activity proposed. Certainly, all the agencies are quite focused on that issue of, what is the appropriate carrying capacity, and that's not only an interagency discussion, but it's also a broader national and maybe even an international discussion.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate your time. Councillor Rodway.
Thank you. Just about biodiversity. The coastal area of Southland, not just in Fiordland, but from all around the Wellington coast there, around Bluff, from Maui to Bluff, around the coast of the Catlins, there's an amazing amount of indigenous biodiversity and the kelp forests and everything that's associated with that. I see that we're looking at protecting environments or habitats rather than individual species, which I think is really good. But I just want to, my question is, or plea really, is that, let's not forget those areas which are an amazing area of biodiversity, and they're more accessible to people as well. So, people that collect power, for example, crayfish and that from those areas, it's really really important we protect those areas, and they are possibly more at risk too because of sewage discharges, for example, with the changes the government's proposing for sewage discharges to the ocean. There's a greater risk from places like Riverton, Invercargill, Bluff, for example. So my plea, Madam Chair, is to make sure we don't forget about these places. We don't sort of think, Fiordland is a place we need to protect, which is true, but all these other places need to be protected as well. And compared to on land, there's so much natural biodiversity there already that is there that hasn't been destroyed. It's really important to protect that.
Thank you. I'll just respond to that. There is a substantial piece of technical work that is being scoped up at the moment around marine ecological areas for the region. So it's not just the Fiordland, it's for the whole of that coastal area. So if it doesn't come into the coastal plan, it will definitely inform our marine spatial planning. So at the moment, it's really just identifying the areas rather than working out whether they're significant or not. That's another layer of work on top of that. But it is will involve quite a few range of different scientists and piece of work. So Karen's team is busy scoping out that risk.
Thank you.
Chair, Catherine from our marine team's unfortunately not here, but while Fieldland is a real focus obviously for the Underarea program, the marine team is very conscious of the importance of the broader Southland coastal marine area. It's not just Fieldland focus. Obviously, it's a 3,000 kilometres of coastline, and I think it's about 36,000 square kilometres of coastal marine area. So it's a big patch, but as you correctly highlight, there's whole lots of really important values there, not just Fieldland related values. And so that's factored into their work program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The recommendation is to receive the report. So if there are no more questions, would somebody like to do that, please?
That's a movement. Yeah.
Chairman Horrell, seconded, please.
I will.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. Right. The proposed regional framework for action. Okay. Welcome. Thanks for the updated version, councillors. If you don't have the updated, most up to date.
Yep.
Framework in front of you. Speak now or forever hold your peace. You don't? Do we have some? You can have mine actually. You got some more?
Thank you very much.
Replace Hayley's, please. Thank you. Just before you start, Anka, just for the councillors, just to remind you that the 3 recommendations are to receive the report, note the community engagement insights report, and adopt the proposed regional framework for action. Thanks. Okay, take it away.
Kia ora koutou. Normally I take information reports and briefings as read, but today is quite an important briefing today. So I've got a presentation to skip through, and the first thing I was going to note is the recommendations. So thank you.
Great minds.
Starting with that. So just wanting to note that there are quite a few attachments with this report. The first one is the Community Engagement Insights report, and we'll start with that, as this has been quite influential in terms of how the proposed regional framework for action has come together. One of the things that we heard, the Regional Climate Change Working Group heard a lot through the phase 1 strategy process, was that we were very reliant on the formal consultation as the main mechanism of hearing what people thought about the strategy. And so the Regional Climate Change Working Group took this on board, and we're very keen to ensure that this time around with phase 2, that there was more effort put into understanding where the community react with in terms of our changing climate here in Southland. So this meant we attended quite a few AMP shows, SIT Orientation Week, Surf to City, the big one being Climate Collaboration, POE, and we've pretty much been keeping strategy and policy up to date on this over the past few months. So turning to the report itself, I'll hand over to Phil to comment on the questions that we worked through with our community.
Sure. Kia ora. Just looking at so we've obviously gone through the exercise of talking to 350 plus people, organisations from all over the region, a whole lot of different platforms. So we've done online, we've done in person. And one of the things to note about this is it really builds on what we've done previously around that perception study we did, perception survey we did in 2023. And then obviously the consultation on the strategy last year. So we're building up quite a good body of knowledge from around what's on the public mind and where their thinking is at in terms of changing climate. So the first question we asked was, what changes in the climate have you noticed in your area? It was a really nice way to just get the conversation started with people and to really localise it and to have them think about what they notice in the day-to-day lives. So things, a lot of people talk about shifting seasons. I think winter's definitely here this year. It hasn't arrived late this year, but a lot of people talked about the seasons
changing around, being very unpredictable. More extreme weather was very common, fewer frosts, less snow. We had Snowball was talking about seasons being shorter, temperature changes, more intense, the milder days and some unusual weather patterns. Changes in plant and crop cycles, so we've got some interesting, talked to a lot of gardeners about how things are changing in their gardens and farmers as well. So impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems, and just the increased uncertainty, the ability to struggle to plan. It's a bit like trying to plan a holiday in summer. It's not the easiest exercise nowadays. So when is summer? Moving to the second question. So we asked, are you doing anything differently because of our changing climate? And we've got a lot of responses around energy and conservation, reducing power use, different alternative energy sources, sustainable transport, of course, waste reduction, avoiding plastics, farm adaptations, so livestock changes, soil health focus, flood preparedness, which of course is on, never far from our minds, especially in the regional council front, and lifestyle shifts, so doing things at different times of the day, event planning, just kind of altering the way you operate a little bit because of what's happening outside. And then the third question we had, which was what actions, what more can councils do essentially to support climate change action in Southland? So a lot around flood and water management, which is of course core function for us. Support for farmers, rural land, and stronger waste and recycling policies. So public education and awareness was a really strong one. So there were some really good suggestions there around terminology use, like 1 in 100-year floods and LIDAR and beacon. And people saying, well, we hear these terms a lot, but we don't necessarily have a good understanding of these. So I think it really shows us there's a bit of work to do there. Energy independence, renewable investments, solar, hydro, nuclear. There was only one person I would like to add. Proactive climate.
Only takes one.
It only takes one. Yeah, so really good wide range, and obviously within this is a fairly heavy summary in terms of theming the feedback. So you've got within the full report, you can see the lots and lots of comments there, wide range. Yeah, the Hui on April 3rd was an excellent day. We had sort of 80 to 100 people there, really good speakers. I think the feedback we got from there was fairly consistent around, and actually really engaged audience. Some people people from industry, councils. We had some kids from Hugs there, which is fantastic. I shouldn't say kids, students from Hugs, sorry. And yeah, really wanting to be involved. And I think the whole point of the engagement was coordinated out from what had been up to that stage, us kind of getting our ducks in a row from a local government perspective and stuff, and really good collaborative exercise. And just quickly on a couple of things there, we had Simon Upton, Commissioner for the Environment, talking about working alongside banks and insurers, really important high quality data. We had Professor James Greenwood talking about the economic narrative, helping shift behaviour and justify investments, which is really relevant. And then just removing barriers, like Casey, Aotearoa talked about that a lot. So yeah, they're a great example, I think, of regional collaborations. So it's been great to work alongside STC and ICC Gore and Marama. And yeah, it's where we are today. So we're really happy with the feedback we've had.
Excuse me, folks. I just need to check with you. I've got a councillor with a question. Do you want to take that now or later?
Happy to take it now. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the team too much, so ask a question and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Chair, through you, Chair. Just with regards to our aspirations, and I'm going to focus on waste after we've just gone through the coastal plan and the threat there being a lot of plastic waste and everything else. We're looking at carbon zero for our region. We're looking at a lot of good work happening within our region, but every day there's hundreds of trucks bringing and importing waste as new product into our region. And we can't seem to do anything with that. And it only rears its ugly head up in situations like respected Stuart has mentioned in the Mutton Islands, because our waste may not be getting dealt with presently as good as it could be, and there's excess waste and plastic appearing all around our region. So my thoughts would be, my question would be, would you think that we need to put more focus on the cause and not trying to solve the issues? The cause being we're importing a hell of a lot, hundreds and thousands of tons of product which will become waste in the future into our region as imported carbon. It never gets taken back, it never gets removed, it always ends up in landfill, and not all of it's captured correctly through waste projects, recycling projects, and the excess ends up at our coastlines, in our natural environment, in our paddocks, and in a lot of areas that we shouldn't have it. So my question is, should we be looking more at the cause of the issue, not trying to rectify it?
So there's some really good comments, sorry, through you, in there around the need to create markets for waste, but you're right, it's bringing it back to that the waste streams in the first place, isn't it? And from where they're produced from. So certainly very valid and definitely something that we need to consider.
And if I might, councillor, I think the intent of the regional framework for action actually partly addresses that very issue of, because it's a much broader plan, but maybe if we keep going, that you'll see how that fits.
Well,
And we can come back to the topic if you feel we need to, but I think the broader issue is absolutely, that is actually part of it. Thanks. Okay.
So in terms of the other appendices to the decision report, the second attachment is the interagency report for the final Regional Climate Change Working Group workshop that was held on the 19th of June. So the workshops earlier this year were very much focused on listening and looking at the analysis of the community engagement insights and how could they be incorporated into the draft regional framework for action. And then the 19th of June workshop it's now the pointy end, and it was much more of a decision-making workshop about making sure that what was going into the proposed regional framework for action reflected the process to date. So that interagency report contains a summary of those decision-making points, as well as some reflections where the group took a chance to reflect on where they've come from, what they envisaged when they first started as part of this process, and where that's at compared to where the group is at now. And so some of those reflections are in the report as well. The third attachment is the letter of recommendation. So this is a letter from the Regional Climate Change Working Group to Chairman Burrell, and has a whole lot of key messages in this as well, in terms of what the Regional Climate Change Working Group wanted the council to consider as part of the proposed regional framework for action. The fourth attachment is a summary overview document. So this is a one-pager, and this is something that the Regional Climate Change Working Group really wanted to have as just in a nutshell, what is the regional framework for action about? So the one-pager was produced. This may still get massaged a wee bit more, but essentially that's a draft at the moment that tries to condense the whole proposed regional framework for action purpose into that one-pager. And the very last attachment is the proposed regional framework for action on climate itself. And so just to note that another version of this appendix has been handed around today. So if anybody doesn't have a copy, I've still got a file here. The content of that attachment hasn't changed. It's just that it's a slightly more polished version, as we've added a few more imagery into it and things like that. So essentially, as we are talking through the proposed regional framework for action today, if you could refer to the most up-to-date version in front of you, that was handed out. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of the key things from the proposed regional framework for action. One of the most important components is the explanation of the purpose of this document. So very early on, the Regional Climate Change Working Group determined that there needed to be two phases. So that first high-level strategy that Council adopted last year, and then this phase has been about translating the aspirations of that strategy into what that might look like as a way forward. One of the things that the Regional Climate Change Working Group had to work through was whether what was phase 2 going to be a regional framework for action or a regional framework of action. And one of the things that it did swing back and forth a wee bit, but one of the things is that they became very clear that this is a regional framework for action. So by that, what is meant is that it's establishing that structured and enduring process for regional planning and delivery. It's got shared outcomes in it, focus areas. It's expected by achieving this improved visibility and alignment of planned actions, clarifying roles and responsibilities, because some of the things that we were being grappled with sometimes was, well, who is the lead agency here and who is the supporting agency, and so clarifying those as part of that, but also collectively fostering that culture of learning and continuous improvement, supported by that meaningful community engagement. So in a nutshell, the purpose projects the fact that this is going to be the document that guides how ongoing action planning will go forward. Which leads me to the next slide, which is the illustration of ongoing climate action planning. It implies that there's a phase 3, but really phase 3 is the fact that this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's not climate change and responding to a changing climate. It's not something that is going to be resolved overnight. It's something that we need to make sure we're going to continually work on resolving. And so the fact that we create an ongoing climate action planning process will hopefully ensure that that carries on a regular cycle. So this proposal is to connect it back with local government long-term planning. This is because the long-term planning cycle is pretty important in terms of councils determining where their resourcing lies, and also like the community mandate is also quite a key part of that long-term planning cycle. So connecting it back to that made a lot of sense to the Regional Climate Change Working Group. Another key feature of the Regional Framework for Action is the collaboration continuum. This is an adapted version of a continuum. It really reflects that we can work together at various levels, and sometimes a project only needs us to share information and make sure that we kind of know what each other's doing at one end of the spectrum. This is the other end of the spectrum where project really benefits from making sure that we're fully collaborating and we're doing something for that takes each other's needs on board in terms of the key partner agencies and beyond. So while there is an appendix in the back of the Regional Framework for Action that highlights some resourced actions, that appendix identifies where each of those projects lie in terms of this collaboration continuum. And so the idea is that as new projects are considered going forward, that they will also reflect that collaboration continuum. So this again will help clarify visibility and alignment of planned actions, as well as roles, responsibilities and priorities, getting the swim lanes right and making sure we can work together effectively. The key focus areas, these aren't too much different to what Council has already seen as part of a strategy and policy briefing earlier this year. These seem to land quite well, and so in the Regional Framework for Action there are there's a page dedicated to each of these boxes, and that page outlines what we've heard from the community, the key messages from that, so going back to the community engagement report, key messages about what our community want, as well as key statements about what we will do. And so those statements about what we will do are very similar in nature to what was worked through with the Strategy and Policy Committee earlier this year. I think at that point in time they were called high-level actions, so that the phrasing is slightly different, but I think they've also essentially also been refined in relation to the conversations around this table, as well as the conversations around other council tables that have happened as well. So in summary, today is quite an important day for the consideration of the work of the Regional Climate Change Working Group. What is being presented is the product of phase 2, the proposed regional framework for action on climate. What is next is that, depending on how the conversation goes today, a letter of recommendation will be sent to all of the key partner agencies as soon as possible following this meeting. And that will be formally requesting the consideration of this proposed regional framework for action at the meetings that are highlighted on the screen there, which are all in the coming weeks. And so there may also be a form update after that, depending on how things go. And then, of course, that's the wrap up for this triennium, and we'll be pulling together key things to make sure that what we've heard from this Regional Climate Change Working Group can be carried forward to the next triennium with whatever shape that group may take in the following local government elections. So on that basis, I can leave you again with a recommendation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Can we come back to that? So I've got Councillor Donald, somebody else over there, Councillor Rodway. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to get his names right. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really comprehensive stuff here. I think, I've been a big supporter of this initiative for quite some time. And I looked through around risk of the process, the framework for action, and you've highlighted on it local government elections, and I see that as a risk period. We're already seeing some prospective elected members using populism around climate change. It's a very tricky subject, but we can't pretend it's not there. It is there. Has there been any talk around that protection of this process through that election process, so it endures after it? So that's a risk that I'm concerned about. And also proving the worth of the groups in a regional way, as opposed to every council doing this work. Have we got some idea of what resources of planning and policy would go into each individual council that we see up there on the screen if they were to undertake their own work as opposed to a regional group undertaking it? Has there been any work along those lines to see what the value is? Because people immediately, and I've read this in the commentary in the media saying that it costs too much money. It comes with a cost.
So, Councillor, can I get Hayley to answer your first question, or on 3 question as well? Fantastic.
Okay, so you will note in the framework, for the proposed framework for action, we have 2 types of actions that we have as part of the working group committed to. There are resourced actions, and then there are recommended actions. So absolutely, this has been a discussion both at the working group and then at the individual contributing councils executives table. What the approach we've taken, the resourced actions are those that appear through the LTP and the annual plans as committed and resourced actions. Most of ours, if they're not already underway, are in next financial year's business plan, because they track down from the LTP through the annual plan and then into our individual work programs. The recommended actions, in order to straddle this period between this council and the next, they will form part of our briefing to the incoming council as a recommendation to that council for their consideration, should they wish to request to staff and make a decision that they become resourced actions, again through LTP and annual plan, and then our own business planning processes. So that's how we've managed to sort of straddle that. We obviously can't, there's a certain point at which we can't commit the future council to action, so we felt that we were on quite safe ground, taking that kind of twin stream approach to those actions and in alignment. And that's across all of the contributing parties to that. To your second question, I think that potentially it's actually also a question around governance. That's correct. And so one of the discussion points was, are we at a point in the evolution of this wide-ranging program of work where the working party model is not or is still fit for purpose or not fit for purpose? So one of the resource actions, which was previously a recommended action, we did take the decision to put that into the work program so that we could look at what is the best form of governance and ask our new council and contributing entities will ask their new governance as well. Is this voluntary working group situation still serving the purpose of the work? It's still serving our communities and businesses and the environment? Or would another model, such as a joint committee, which is able to take decisions and implement them on behalf of all of the local government contributors, a more appropriate model? So that's something that we will be working on going forward, and be taking to each of us will be taking to our next councils. That answers your question, Councillor McDonald.
I'm sorry, my question was pretty long and confusing, but basically what I would like to think is that I go around proving the awareness. So this individual work done by these 4 councils, is it a far better value for the ratepayer to be done by one entity and all information to be supplied to those councils to make up their long-term planning?
I think the through you, Jeff, the approach we've taken is it's collective work, but then that drops down, and please forgive me if I'm wrong, I'm new to this kaupapa, into individualised action, so that and then because there are regular governance meetings to check in on progress, identify issues, and then you get an integrated help with the solve as well. So we are, as a working group, constantly they're tracking between individual action and commitments and then collective. But again, we think it's always worth looking at that value proposition. So is that model still the right one? Is it still achieving the outcomes and driving value for our ratepayers? And we agree that's an important question we need to ask regularly, which is why that is part of that consideration in the the resourced action. I think we need to not have them both start with R. Or I need another coffee. In that resourced action, to actually ask that question: does this model still deliver value where we're at in our in the life cycle, I guess, which Anka had up on the screen as we work through this program.
Look, thanks very much. On the face of it, one action is more efficient than 4 actions, one would think. Anyway, but
Anka, did you have something else to add?
Thank you. The one of the things is that the Appendix 2 is a whole bunch of tables that relate back to those key focus areas. And for example, on page 26, the ones around understanding climate change, science and risk, you'll see that as part of that collaboration commitment, Environment Southland is identifying itself as the lead for all of the actions that have been identified in that table. That is where the resourcing has been already determined, and so the point of this document is bringing that visibility of those actions to that. And also, I guess that's where, even though that's already started happening, that's where this group is already demonstrating its worth. So when there is an action such as 4.2, which is around the updating of the Southland climate change impact assessment work, that has been done already in collaboration with our key partner agencies to make sure that we take on board what their needs are as well for that assessment. And so it's not just what Environment Southland thinks needed to happen for that assessment, but we've asked the key partner agencies as well what sort of things are needed to be taken into account as that work was scoped. And so therefore, hopefully, when the report comes to completion, which is imminent, that it will also be reflective of the needs of all of those key partner agencies. And so the value of that being a resource action where Environment Southland is taking the lead, but then doing it in collaboration with our key partner agencies means that it should hopefully have more value when the end product is available.
Thanks, Anka. Councillor Rodway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, well, I assume everybody knows that I've been on this group since its inception, and the question that Peter asked is addressed there in Appendix 2, as Anka says. Consider options for formal governance arrangements and recommendation of as a recommendation or a preferred option for decision makers. That has been talked about quite a bit through the period. The risk is that if you have a formal group, then some of the councils might feel that they lose some of their independence and their ability to make decisions that affect their ratepayers. So it's quite a sensitive issue. I think we've done pretty well, actually, and Phil Morrison, of course, is the chair, and Anka slaving away really to produce this. Has done a lot of work, and some people have criticised us for not coming up with things that are more tangible, more progress. But I think setting the framework, which is followed on from the strategy, which is obviously the overall goals. While some people say, "Oh, well, you really haven't done much," but when you look at these things in Appendix 2 that Anka has talked about what will happen as a result of this, there's really quite a lot of significant stuff in there. So I think it really is quite an achievement, given the constraints and the political situation that we're in. It's been really important to establish that unified approach, and I think we've achieved that. There's a little bit of discussion and disagreement from some people on the group and within the councils. But Phil's done a great job of going out to community boards to talk to them, going to the district councils to their meetings and talk to them about as well. So I think we're really on a really good foundation. So when you look at what we're actually asking this council to do, and other councils as well, it's on page 22, and this has been mentioned already today, the purpose of the regional framework for action. Those 5 points there are what you need to have to make progress in this area, because there is a lot of 30% of people in our community, which is quite a lot of people, maybe a bit less than that, don't think there's a problem at all. So there's quite a barrier to overcome, and I think the way this has been set up is the best way of achieving that. So I really support this, obviously, because I've been on the group, but I hope everybody else does as well. I do think that the recommendation, though, number 3, is to recommend to the council that it adopts the proposed regional plan of action rather than just this committee adopting it. Is that what you meant to do?
Through you, Chair, yes, this would have to be. My understanding is, and fairly new, and I'm flying solo without Rachel Miller today for the first time, but that is my understanding, so that we would need to seek a slight amendment to the way that is worded.
Thank you.
We recommend that the council adopt the proposed.
Recommend to council that they adopt.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, but an explanation.
Yep.
Hopefully made it clearer for people.
Thank you. I'm slightly out of protocol, but I think if everybody agrees to that amendment, we'll just take it as being accepted amendment without going through the many steps of changing it. Thank you. We'll come back to and remind ourselves of that at the end after discussions. Councillor Horrell, you're next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just want to acknowledge the work that Phil and Anka have been doing with that group over a lot of time, a lot of energy has gone into it. It's a comprehensive document, so it's well done on where you've got to so far. I mean, had a meeting the other day with Great South, with the Air New Zealand's environmental manager for the South Island, and in their briefing they were saying they were pretty confident that we were on track in Southland for the 2050 target. Obviously, a lot of work has gone on in industrial heating and other areas. But the point's been made about national consistency, and I think with government calling for one plans, it makes sense to have some consistency. We'll never have 100% buy-in, but I think this framework is very good. Just going back to Paul's comments on waste minimisation, I was quite stunned to see programs recently that showed that they claimed that waste is 8% of the world's emissions. I was more than the airlines. I was actually quite staggered by that. And a regional approach, we know we can actually produce energy if you've got enough bulk to deal with some of this waste. And it may have to go over the border to actually have the economies of scale in Southland. You might need to be taking in part of Otago to get that volume. But I think cooperation in that area would be good at the moment. It is a bit disjointed as to what people are doing. And the cheapest thing to do is put it in the hole in the ground. And we've got to get away from that. But look, no, we absolutely support what's come forward. And I was assuming because it's a meeting of the whole council, but it still would be a recommendation. So I agree with the
Thank you.
slight amendment.
Councillor Evans, you have a question, and then I'll also get Hayley to answer your other question.
Well, thank you. No, it was just in relation to Councillor McDonald and also everyone here. And I can sort of get where Councillor McDonald's coming from, and the fact that maybe I'm wrong here, but there's a lot of work being inputted here, and I'm not sure yet of the payback. And I don't want to diminish the work that you guys have done. There seems to be a hell of a lot of direction from groups and councils and Great Southern strategy groups and everything else, but not so much from community as far as I can see, unless it's individually, but from those groups. And I just really would like to know, is there an end game for improvement? And I'm fearful we'll just keep going along building more work with this sort of work and consuming funding and involving councils, but at the end of the day, we may not be the ones that should be involved in this process. We, as key partners, agencies, may not be the correct people. I hear our chair saying another way of looking at waste would be good instead of burying it, and I would love to look at the future where we may look at incinerating. I know that sounds terrible, but we have a lot of countries around the world that do that. But there's a lot of work coming up from this framework, and we need to see a cultural shift where everyone's on board, where the community's on board, where everyone wants to move forward and get to an end game. Because at the moment there's a lot of work happening, a lot of funding being consumed, but we just seem to be, I need some confidence. And everyone's looking at it and going, yay, and a lot of work, but I just need some confidence. And I don't want to be detrimental to all your work that you put in. It's just where I sit at the moment.
Thanks for your comments, Councillor. Does anybody have a response to that?
Just thanks for the question, Councillor Evans. And I think one of the other benefits of the process around extending engagement is really seeing what everyone else is doing, and to what degree we can avoid duplication of effort, and and actually make sure, I think, like you said, that people are in the right swim lanes and that there's an efficiency of activity, and that we're all sort of rowing the right way or the same way. So I think there's a lot of value in the exercise from that point of view.
Thank you. I would also add that yes, there'll be an end game, but it's a really long game, and some of us may not live long enough to see the outcomes. Hayley.
Oh, I mean, I was going to just add that under that, the last outcome, that does speak to the role of communities and businesses. And so this is a cycle, in effect, and we would see that there will be aspects that Environment Southland would continue to play a lead role. But it's one of these things, a bit like, you know, a catchment, if you will. We'll start to see greater contribution by businesses and communities as we work with them to understand the importance of this work, what the outcome that we're seeking is. And I would reflect, and in part to answer your other question around waste, one of the outcomes that we've defined is around embracing and promoting sustainable low emissions practices, which then there are accompanying actions under there, which is about how we work with communities and business so that they are able to successfully and sustainably transition from high embodied carbon practices and carbon emitting practices in order to then, particularly in the business sense, still have sustainable, thriving businesses that have adapted to implement low embodied carbon or low carbon generating practices to support their business outcomes. And that includes waste, and to the chair's very important point around the proportion of waste. So that absolutely is part of both of those points that you made, the action.
Thank you. And supplementary to that, sorry, the 2050 target for carbon zero, in my opinion, is not being correctly measured anyway. Because when I've been involved in workshops regarding that 2050 carbon zero, I've asked what's included in that. And one of the things that I raised was imported products into our region, and then they're left to deal with them. Is not being included in that. We're also not including the exporting of our timber out of our region after it's been done. So the filters or the guidelines for measurement of carbon zero, and we are doing a lot of work towards that. And I remember someone saying we may not get it down to zero. Well, that's the aspiration in the title, but in my opinion, we're not measuring it correctly. To be clear, in a couple more decades, we might have big mountains of waste under soil. I don't know whether that's the way forward we need to go. No improvement on the products coming into our region.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Valid concerns. I have Councillor Gibson and then Councillor Guyton, and then maybe Councillor McDonald again.
This is a fantastic report. It's great. It covers all the aspects that are in train at the moment. I just feel that we've talked about value, and value hasn't been defined. I feel that if you put on top of this, and it being the icing, the economic value estimated, because we've got 33,300 doubters. How do we keep eating away at that? Put something out there that molds the whole thing together, and you'll bring all your groups together and probably bring in business at the same time, as they start to understand it. That's just how I see it in my simple terms.
Councillor, do you see that as being part of the framework though, or as part of a slightly different conversation?
It's probably quite a different conversation, but that is the end point that you're going to get people with. And people are the things that are going to make this work.
Yep, understood. Thank you. Councillor Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, congratulations. You've done very well. A while, and you've done a lot of hard work. I actually support. I'm not concerned that there isn't a to-do list here. Like, here you go and do these things and we'll solve our problem. I'm not worried about that at all. I think the most important thing is what you've done, and that is you've increased your own understanding, and that understanding of the issue has moved out into the peripherals. That's the main thing, even if we haven't put a peg in the ground, so to speak, from my perspective. Second thing I wanted to say is I was raised in Nelson. I'm really glad I don't live in Nelson right now. And for those 30% or whatever people, Southlanders who don't, whatever the percentage was.
Sorry, just to, I think we might have referenced the figure in the perceptions survey in 2023, which is 13%.
13,
Yes, so.
You can speak more clearly.
Speech lessons for you.
Yeah, so those people might spend some time in Nelson over the next week or so, or last week. And the other thing I wanted to say, oh yes, I can't remember if we actually spoke about this. We did at some point, but this is the satellite that was going to do this wonderful work of measuring methane output that was circling the planet, and it was going to tell us where all the big methane leakages were coming from. They'd be from big industry, from oil and gas and so on. Gone missing. Did you hear that? It's gone, it's lost in space. Curiously, but New Zealand taxpayers invested $29 million in that, in the whole lot of PR. It's gone. I just wonder if
Where it is.
if you know where it
Have
is.
you got it?
And if you've got anything to do with it. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because
Thank you, councillor.
some aspects of the future management of this issue can't be counted upon. It's a really good example. That's all I wanted.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor McDonald, do
Thank
you
you very much.
have a question?
Very quick.
Jim?
I just want to pick up on your response that you talked with the question with Councillor Evans about a slow moving issue. You know, and the response will take a very long time. So climate change is often referred to as a slow moving emergency. So one would think that the response will be likewise. And I see that as a risk in itself. And I think that should be considered too, because everyone in today's world, quick gratification of everything we see, people want to see results, and we've seen this around the table. Where's the results? We need to see results. So that in itself, I think, is a risk. Is there any opportunity next term for the group to provide, let's see, or do a case study or a set of case studies of how the group would work outside of the LTP on different issues? Now, I know the Gravel Working Group used that quite successfully. Just an idea. And that's proving one's worth too. You can say it is a slow moving response, we can do that like that, but the reality of the world we live in is very quite differently. So I just wanted to pick up.
Yeah, I also want to be clear that what I meant was that the outcomes might be harder to see in the immediate future, but the actions need to be now, right?
Yeah.
That's, yeah. So the outcomes, it's taken a while for us to get here, but it's exponentially changing. It's going to take quite a long shift. Anyway, I have Stuart, and then we might draw this to a close. Thank you.
Yeah, Kia, I'd just say thank you for this strategy being presented. In my mind, I think it's maybe one of the quicker ones that have from consideration to being presented. And so it's certainly been given a good focus. My concern, I guess I just want to share that issue of continuity where to from here, i.e. changing of the guard and such like. So that's always a big major concern. So hopefully that we can carry it on through. Councillor McDonald talked about should one agency be carrying it over and above the others. I'm quite keen that we keep that collaboration, because I think the main benefit of this whole strategy is that it's something that we keep front of mind, and just so because it's not just a framework for climate change, it's a climate, it's an action that we need to consider on all the cope-up that we're undertaking. And it's almost, do we need to take into account on what's the consequences of everything that we're doing in regards, and what's the outcomes and the consequences in as far as climate might be affecting, i.e. Our emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere, not just me, but you and you and you. And so if you've got the big collaboration all thinking about that, I think the most important thing is it's just something front of mind that needs to be taken account of as we go about our business. So, kia ora.
Thanks, Stuart. Just my final comments also thanks to Anka and the supporting staff and Councillor Rodway and Councillor Morrison for, bringing together a
Solid work.
a disparate group of philosophies into a framework that really is actually quite workable and actually quite implementable should the rest of the contributors adopt it. We've all been in those airy-fairy discussions that go kind of nowhere. So to your point, Stuart, this has come together really, really quickly. And appreciate that that's not easy when you're dealing with a number of different philosophies and approaches. So, and I think it's excellent. So I am going to move that we first of all receive the report, note the community engagement insights report. Thank you to the team who put that together because I know that's not easy. And then the third thing, just for the rewording, is recommend that council adopt the proposed regional framework for action on climate for Murihiku South. So I will move that. Would somebody like to second, please?
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Chairman Horrell. Any further? Fantastic. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Awesome. Carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. Can't say it enough. And councillors, just to remind you, we'll see it again at the next council meeting because we've got to formally approve it at the council meeting. Thanks. Okay. Right, swiftly on to 9.3, which is the government policy and legislation monitor. And again, my sympathies to the people who have to do this because it's also not light work. Thanks, Shana. You take it away.
So this item brings with the latest updates to legislation and national policy. As you may be aware, a lot has been happening in the space since our last committee meeting. Firstly, the consultation on regulatory standards bill has closed recently, and we council has provided our submission. We learned today that the select committee has invited Environment Southland to deliver on those. So preparation will be underway today.
When will that be? Sorry to interrupt. When will that be?
The date hasn't been confirmed yet.
Thanks.
How much of their 30 hours allotted are we going to use?
We'll come back to that. Carry on, Shana. Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted.
And there has also been consultations led by the Department of Conservation, and the council has also lodged submissions on Monday. And because these submissions were due to time constraint, approvals were obtained outside the formal council process. So we will be seeking retrospective approval of those submissions at the next council meeting. And the key consultation that's currently open, of course, is the National Direction Package that's out at the moment. So workshop has took place on the 19th of June with councillors and Manawatu representatives to discuss the key aspects of the proposals. Thank you for all the valuable input. Staff have taken those away and are currently working diligently behind the scene to develop our submissions, and we hope to bring the draft submissions to you as soon as possible for your review and further feedback. There are a number of other consultations that are running alongside the RMPs, and they include an amendment bill that relates to sustaining wapiti populations in national parks. So currently a bill is out for consultation seeking to change the legal landscape to allow introduced species to exist within national parks. So that's laying the groundwork for further specific changes that will be introduced later. And that the consultation closes in about a month. Staff are currently engaging in a analysis to assess the significance of the proposals. Also, there is currently a bill going through the select committee process relating to preventing full farm conversion to forestry. And it's came with a really tight timeframe, reasons I'm not exactly sure. So the consultation is closing on the 7th of July. And staff have made a strategic decision to, due to limited capacity, perhaps not to formally engage with this bill. But if council has other suggestions, we are considering it. And that decision was made because we didn't envisage that the proposal was present any aspects that this council might have strong views against. The other consultation that may be of interest to you is the draft National Infrastructure Plan that's currently out for consultation until early August. And some work is on the way to assess the significance of proposals that have been released. So that brings my summary.
Councillor McDonald, are you going to go down the forestry discussion? Or is
You've got it. There's high interest in looking at
it is, thank you.
Was there any change with it going through the first reading last week? It was on the 10th. So through the 10th, yeah. Going through government, introduced into government, wasn't it? Was there no specific changes come out of that?
Yeah, it was largely in alignment with the official announcements. So that seemed to be effectively restricting plantings on class 1 to 5 lands, having 15,000 hectare cap on class 6 land, but also enabling some flexibility around a portion of farms within class 1 to 5. So it's generally what we anticipated, given the short timeframes, and generally it seems to support protecting high class land for planting and particularly collecting ETS credits. We thought that may not be our best spend on energy, given the capacity we've got, but we're happy to take share from council. If it is a priority, then we can have an adjustment and put something in.
Can I just ask, do you think, with your knowledge around this land use classification, that it's accurate enough if we're going to start making these determinations, these specific determinations around these complex issues? Because I look at the classification and I see inaccuracies just locally of, this sort of stuff too. And in the initial stuff that came out, government did say that there was a facility to question the classifications.
Yeah, through the Madam Chair, the classification is articulated in the National Policy Statement for highly protected land, and there's a requirement there that regional councils remap their regions to reclassify that land use capacity. So that's the body of work that is going to be undertaken in the next year or so, just to confirm the status of the land and how productive that land is. So that would enrich our understanding of where who's best to plant. So let's just fit together those two pieces.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcus. Councillor Guyton.
Just a question. It really puzzles me. Doesn't this proposal run exactly opposite to, for example, the regulatory standards bill is based on the idea of private property rights, therefore, whereby you can do what you like on your own property as long as it doesn't affect. And this is saying exactly the opposite. You cannot do what you want to do if you wanted to plant trees on your own property. How are they reconciling that? I don't understand.
Through Madam Chair, it is a difficult one, and it's something that we've, I guess, a lot of the planners and practitioners in the space looking at the legislation going from RMA to even phase 3, the replacement RMA. That's one of the key tension points around how do you improve water quality or improve the marine coastal environment or use of land with private property rights. Effectively, there's parts there that are going to be really difficult to reconcile, and the devil's going to be in the detail around how that comes out over the course of the legislation process. But yeah, it is very difficult to, I guess, say you can do one thing but then not with the other, and the centralisation of some of these decision makings makes it more difficult as well. It's more removed from the regions that may be best to decide these aspects.
I'd characterise the government as being schizophrenic. No, seriously.
Thank you, councillor. Hayley's got a
One of the mechanisms in order to try and achieve policy coherence, which ministry officials have admitted to us is challenging at the moment, is through their concept of regulatory takings compensation. And so presumably that is how the government is proposing to achieve policy coherence, to your point.
Yeah. It doesn't help, but thank you. Yeah, okay, thanks anyway.
Point made, councillor. Any further questions? Chairman Horrell and then councillor Roy.
Yeah, well, just some clarification on that subject we're having. It's my understanding, and I haven't read the bill, but I've listened to what was said at the 4th of December announcement, which the bill emanated from, is it doesn't prevent anybody planting trees on their entire property, but they're not able to claim carbon credits for above a percentage. So it puts it back then into the commercial value of the trees. So it actually, it's not quite as comprehensive a ban as what you're suggesting, Councillor Guy.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell.
I'm not going to say when you look at the legislation coming at us that we have to submit on, that's huge. And some of these that are intertwining, like the changes to the highly productive land NES will also probably affect the forestry thing that they're talking about. At the moment, it's classes 1 to 3. They're going to remove 3. But interesting that I would have thought with some of our elevation stuff, we should have pretty good technology to be able to identify some of those areas. Ministers are constantly telling me that, and it'd be interesting to see if things are slowing now. There's been a real gold rush, and people, well, the plants were available, therefore we were thinking about it. So they're going ahead. Ministers are saying some of them will be disappointed. Just reading some of the farming magazines, there appears to have been quite a drop off in recent months, and a corresponding drop in some of the value of some of that land. But we will keep watching that one with interest. I see we are having I'll come up in Hayley's later. But look, our staff are working pretty hard to come up with responses to a lot of stuff. In some cases, we're doing individual submissions. Some of them are combined with the regional council group. But when you look at the page after page, there's a massive amount that we're trying to actually react to and try and get change that makes sense. But no, I think I'll probably leave that there. And the other thing, of course, is the Environmental Act that will come in as part of the RMA. And it's also, I guess, cumulative effects have got to be taken into consideration. It's the old story, private property rights go to a certain extent, but if the cumulative effects are affecting the rest of the community, that balance does have to be there.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor Roy, and then I think
I apologise, I haven't read the piece of legislation, and this may be covered, but if we're looking at forestry per se, and we're just putting some restrictions at one end, the other area that I think we should be engaged in is the acceptability of natives and other trees, and also the measurement of the 1 hectare available for carbon credits. That's an absolute nonsense. If a thing in my tractor is accurate within 2 centimetres, we don't need to rely on these situations that somebody's devised internationally that it has to be a hectare. We need to move that stuff. If we want people to engage in planting trees, there's a whole lot of opportunities outside of pine trees on 1 hectare, and I'd like to see, it may well be in the bill, but I think that should be part of our submission about that. It's just natives and more accurate measurement and less than 1 hectare.
Marcus, can I just clarify with you that we weren't going to submit on that
that was our plan, not to submit regional support
Well,
direction,
I'll
but
do it myself.
there was a decision to
You do
from
that.
council that we should be extending energy on, then we can really adjust priorities and look to put a
Right,
solution.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's general agreement on that, but yeah, Councillor Roy will absolutely do his,
Okay.
exercise his individual rights to submit.
Now, but we're not doing it.
Councillor Guyton, you're the last.
Yeah, just quickly, has it been decided yet who people are going to be put in the standards?
From the political, through you, Madam Chair, from a political perspective, normally we've had Chairman Morrell, but if we could council to advise otherwise, if anyone else wants to.
Will that be a visit to Wellington, or will you just be?
It's usually online.
It depends, like they're often online. If we're pulled out of the hat, and we have been on a number of occasions, you're normally on a Zoom call, and
Okay.
Normally we get 10 minutes, Madam Chair.
it's a long way to fly for 10 minutes.
That's right. Goes against so many of our principles. Thank you. Would somebody like to move that we receive that report? Thanks, Councillor Cox. Seconded, please.
What's going on?
Councillor McDonald. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, team. Keep asking us the questions over the email if you need to. And finally, well, not exactly finally, 9.4 strategy, policy and regional planning update. Page 100 on your agenda.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you.
This is our.
I was just going to say that we had noticed that these regular updates had somehow seemed to have dropped off this committee's agenda. So we've reinstated them. Over to you, Liz.
So it really covers the work that doesn't necessarily require a full report. It's really just an update on some of the other pieces of work that our teams, Marcus and my teams are working on. Some of what's in this report is already covered in the policy monitor document anyway, such as the farm plans changes that are coming our way. Our teams are involved in a lot of cross-organisation pieces of work, such as the winter grazing, sure that we're implementing the provisions and understanding what that means out in the community. But there's a couple of other pieces of work that my team in particular are working on at the bylaws. We've got a couple of bylaws that we're doing a bit of background work and in preparation to come back to council by the end of this year to seek approval for reviews on them. So that's the I'm going to say it wrong, flood control and drainage management bylaw and the navigation safety bylaw.
The only thing I'd like to add, Madam Chair, was just around the national direction submissions that are framing up. There's quite a lot there that directs our work moving forward. So yeah, we've had a workshop with councillors, and if there's any further thoughts or there's any additional reading that councillors have done on those packages, we're happy to hear those comments, and we'll build that up and look to circulate that in the next few weeks before the submissions close.
Thanks, Marcus. Any questions? Councillor Rodway.
Oh, yes, just on winter grazing, I sort of hate to mention this a bit really, but there is an inconsistency in the advice to farmers, as far as I can tell. Farmer, but there's some really good stuff there about how to identify a swale, information about distances from streams and things. So there's no excuse really for anybody not to have that information if they're doing winter grazing. But in there it says that a farmer must have a plan for this activity to be permitted. But the government is saying, well, you don't have to have a farm plan. So I think there's a problem there. And I know we had talked about this before, but if I was a farmer reading that and I said, oh, I've got to have a farm plan for it to be permitted, then what do I do? So how are we dealing with that at the moment? Are we just not worrying too much about that, or are we? Because people will be a bit confused about it, I think.
The advice that we are giving is our plan does require a farm environmental management plan. However, the wording in the rule talks about it being prepared and certified in accordance with the regulations. We are just asking people to prepare a farm plan. So as long as they've got something that covers the bare bones of what is required for a farm environmental management plan, that is the compliance approach that we're dealing with at the moment, because they don't actually need to be certified under the regulations at the moment until May next year. So as long as people are on that journey and we're really, really keen to make sure they've got a winter grazing plan, which would be most important if you're doing winter grazing activities. So we're supporting people around trying to make sure that they've got the bones of a plan prepared and they're on that journey towards certification. We are aware that there's differences between the regulations, the freshwater farm plan requirements, which is through the RMA and the regulations, and our plan requirements, which is farm environmental management plan. Up till now, we've been talking about it as one plan, and we're keen to make sure that if much as possible, people don't end up having to go through two different processes, which is what we're working on at the moment with the Ministry for the Environment. Both as a regional council, we're having specific conversations with officials, but also through Te Uru Kahika and that group, just to try and work out how our plan interacts with that, because it's not tight.
If I may add to that through you, Chair, we have been making quite extensive use over the last quite a while now of the Smart Wintering in Southland brochure, which steps farmers through very carefully what they need to do to prepare that wintering plan. It's got, like, even a townie like me could understand it. It's got great diagrams, it shows what you need to show, provides you with the key definitions, the buffers, where to find further information through our land sustainability team or through other agencies that we work with on that. You will find it, and I hate to use the word littered, given our topic that we've been talking about, but it's in many a vehicle for our field staff. It's also, I noted, we were in meeting with the Federated Farmers the other day. There's copies of that in their reception. So we've provided it to a wide range of entities and people that farmers who do winter will come into contact with, so that they can benefit from that information about how to safely and lawfully undertake winter grazing. We're in the middle of planning our cultivation workshops as well, so we're constantly thinking a season ahead, so that farmers have the information that they need before they need to have it.
Can I follow that up, please, with a scenario? You've sort of answered that. Just imagine me as a farmer.
Be a very good one. Outstanding.
I'm ringing you on this phone number here, 800-768-845. I've done all these things. I've got my swales protected. I've got my fences in the right place, but I don't have. It says here I must have a farm environmental management plan prepared and implemented in accordance with Appendix N. I don't have that. So what can I do?
You will hopefully be put through to, we've got a team specifically set up through the restructure that is building, that is around supporting the people out in the public to pull that information together. So Carla, who's behind here, is building that empire to make sure that there is support for that.
Okay.
For you as the farmer to come in and go, these are the steps that this is the information that you can pull together to make sure that you've met that prepared.
So can I still do my winter grazing, even though I haven't got one completed, but I am in the process of getting one sorted?
That will be a question for our compliance team more than me, but I would suggest that we will take that first run. If you are coming to us and asking that question, you're in the right spot, you are interested, and so that would definitely help. And as long as you're starting on that journey, then I don't think we're going to go out and ask people to stop, but we want to at least make sure you've got that winter grazing plan in place and that you're on the journey. So it's from me. However, Donna and the compliance team may be heading on that.
I mean, yes, we absolutely look at what Liz has described, and then you're on that journey. got your wintering plan in place, then we would say yes. And indeed, many of our farmers are successfully and safely undertaking winter grazing and adhering to that.
Right, thank you.
It's a tricky area though,
But the
which is
key-
why we always ask, come and have a chat to us. We've got a lot of different avenues depending on what your question is, and a lot of ability to support farmers to successfully and safely undertake intensive winter grazing.
The key is communication, I would suggest. I've got councillor Gibson and then Gemma Horrell.
I think to whoever's credit it is, those cultivation workshops that were held last spring advertised that quite nicely, and that you're in the process and going forward, because nobody has the plans, the farm plans organised. So when you're talking and lead on to that, every time we come and talk about farm plans, it's going to be here next week. We get a week older and nothing happens. Where are they?
Are you referring to the guidance document?
No, the actual farm plans.
the farm plans.
Yeah.
We have not yet had one certified.
No, but when is the government going to? Because that's the guts of, I mean, so that's what we're waiting for.
Right, so there are amendments to the resource management consenting and other systems amendment bill that changes the scope of who's required to have a fresh farm plan, and we anticipate that those decisions to come out October.
Yeah, it's not far away.
Soon. So that's for the amendment bill. They're also working on the regulations, which we hopefully to have a workshop and see what some of that regulations might look like by the end of this month. But they're talking about, end of July. They're talking about October for those regulations to come in place, to be in public, in place at the start of next year. So it is a long way with still 6 months.
I said they're talking about extending it to October next year.
No, so our
Because
Auckland Council remains in place until May. However, the regulations are being changed, and the new regulations will land in January-ish next year.
Thank you.
Yes, and Chairman Horrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There has been a bit of confusion out there this year, and I'm glad that Hayley's instigating a cultivation thing, because not all the contractors were aware of the change from the 5 to 10 metres. I understand our staff are working pretty much on an educational basis, as long as they're not completely comply, as long as there's no environmental damage sort of thing. So it's when we've been caught with the wording that Morris has been talking about, from Appendix E to the national direction by government coming over the top of us and putting a hold on the plans, but also saying we've got one plan, which will be risk-based, preferably industry supported, keeping the costs down. Things we all agree with, but at the moment we have a water and land plan which does not mesh comfortably with the national direction that we are waiting. I would say patiently, but I would say some of us would say impatiently for the go ahead to be able to do progress toward the farm plan thing that I've talked about before, but a whole lot of farm focus plans. Great place probably to start, but the direction for people to start gathering this information is really good. Most people will have a plan of some sort. It won't be up to Appendix N standard, but when you drive around, people we were 5 years ago, the compliance with the things we want is hugely improved. You might still have the odd one, and this year there will be some that haven't got the 10 metre buffer, but even on the 5 metre, they would have enough in place normally not to have anything reaching waterways, which is actually what it's all about. So it's a difficult, and the wording in there, when I saw it, I thought the national directions come over the top of it, and it will be confusing for people, but I understand our staff are working with farmers to take any anxiety out of it, and just they can ring up and know that somebody can go out there and talk to them. But in most cases, from the flyovers, for the number of farms that were flown over on the first flight, I have a handful of follow-ups, actually is very positive.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move the recommendation, please? Thanks, councillor Gibson. Seconded councillor McDonald. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Yeah,
Carried.
get home,
Thank you.
shifts and breaks tomorrows.
Sorry, moved my agenda. So we have, I guess the extraordinary business is the action sheet that was tabled at the beginning of the meeting. So I'll just get Hayley to very quickly update us on any of those requests or actions.
Yes, my apologies for that not being included in
Oh,
your main
Also
agenda
mine,
pack.
I missed it.
There were no actions from our last hui, and so here we've tabled the actions for previous hui. With respect to the actions around commercial forestry and also the clarification around aquaculture conversations, we do have, I note, a workshop this afternoon, which both of those matters are going to be canvassed with your good selves, but also I can ask Bruce to provide an answer to the clarification question around marine farm waste and feed practices. He's also leading out inputs into the work that Great South are doing on an aquaculture strategy for Murihiku Southland. I'm seeking further information on the question around New River Estuary and city contaminants, as I'm relatively new and most questions predate me. And as I said, my buddy, Rachel, who seems to be the institutional memory for much of this council, is away on school holidays at the moment. With respect to the question around the climate change portal, that consideration is part of those resourced actions that are in the framework for action that you considered, and as part of a wider set of considerations about how we best communicate with councillors, communication between councillors, and also then with our communities with respect to climate change is undertaken. So hopefully there's a moderately acceptable answers to your good selves.
More than moderately, thank you, Hayley. Would somebody like to move that we receive that report? And it's
I'll move.
Thank you, councillor Roy, seconded councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That takes us to item 11, which is the public excluded business part of today's meeting. We've got through many parts of S&P without a public excluded, so this is kind of exciting.
Someone tell us why we need.
Yes, I'm just getting to that. Ellie's going to tell us that.
Really like to know.
Today's reason is to prevent disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage.
Thank you.
I'd like to move. We
Thank
go
you,
to
councillor
public
Roy.
excluded now that we
Seconded
know why.
by, going to speak at once. Thank you, Chairman Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye against. Carried. Thank you. I'll just wait 2 seconds while
Go offline.
staff run out the door.
And we get
Oh, awful.
Don't-
I want to see the running.
don't-